The board elections at the fall community meeting return the same board members back with fresh terms in office, prompting a number of former board members to question whether a person in authority has tampered with the results. The board votes to oust Ellen Throop as vice president and replaces her with Steve Larsen. The board votes to ban all audio and video recording of all future board meetings. Tim Switzer and Janie Switzer of Dune Road engage the board in an exchange over performing work on their property on Saturdays, and a look at the mailbag. My name is Gregory Pickler of the MXB Wire on location, and you're watching my monthly update for October 24, 2020. In this installment, we will look at the fall community meeting that was held on Saturday, September 19th, 2020, as well as the latest board meeting that was held on Saturday, September 26th, 2020. Now, we have a lot to unpack today, so I'd like to start with the fall community meeting. There were a number of candidate introductions. I thought many of them were very interesting. I'd like to start with the candidate introduction of Nora Alter. Nora Alter was running for the board, I believe, for the first time. My sources on the board reported that Nora Alter was looking to unseat Ellen Throop. So let's listen to her candidate introduction.
My feeling is that Middlesex is the treasure of the East Coast. There are very few communities that are so wooded, that have so many large lots and a beautiful private beach. And I think it's important to retain that unique quality while also addressing current needs and issues. And I feel like I'm particularly tuned to the fact, having an elderly mother, having been here for a while, that Middlesex is comprised of many different constituencies who have very different concerns. Many people now are on fixed incomes. There are new homeowners who perhaps have a little bit more financial flexibility. And I think it's really important that we need to mediate and negotiate a lot of sensitive issues that have come up, issues such as a rental tax.
Firstly, I'd like to say that my intelligence on Nora Alter was bang on. She is both a proponent of the rental tax, and it's clear she's looking to unseat Ellen Throop, who was the only incumbent candidate running who was against the rental tax. The other thing I'd like to point out is that municipalities that have the jurisdictional authority to tax do not negotiate what rate to tax vacation rental properties and commercial business owners in their jurisdiction. That's not the way it's done. They don't sit down and throw numbers out in the air. What they do is they look at what they want to fund that benefit vacation rental property owners as well as commercial businesses in that jurisdiction. And they arrive at a budget to fund those services. For example, Fenwick Island has a staff visitor center. Well, a staff visitor center is a benefit to vacation rental property owners as well as commercial businesses. So the tax, which I believe in Fenwick Island is 7%, goes towards the monies to fund a staff visitor center. The tax does not just lower people's property taxes, as many people who are proponents of the 8% rental tax in Middlesex Beach would like you to believe. It's not going to lower anyone's assessment. Next up, Nancy Glasgow gave her candidate introduction before the teleconference call. Glasgow's speech closely followed her candidate biography, which was distributed to the community weeks before the election. Let's go ahead and play Glasgow clip 1.
I would like to clarify my position on an issue that is getting a lot of attention lately, and that is a rental fee. First and foremost, I'd like to say that Marty Shecter, Steve Larsen, and myself do not have the authority to implement any sort of tax or fee to community members. This would require a covenant change that would be voted on by the community. I do, however, feel it's my duty as a board member to give the community the opportunity to discuss and vote on this issue.
Firstly, you'll notice that the proponents of the 8% rental tax has put forward to the community and in the form of a petition in 2018 are now referring to the tax as a fee. Softens it a little bit. Well, a percentage fee based on rental income is a tax. Municipalities have the jurisdictional authority to tax. Incorporated homeowners associations do not. The other interesting thing here is that she believes it's her duty as a board member to bring the rental tax issue up for discussion and then vote. That presupposes that the community will want to vote. The community might shout it down, but if it were go to a vote, immediately it becomes actionable. Any one of 48 vacation rental property owners could engage the association in litigation, expensive litigation. Let's listen to Glasgow clip number 2.
Rental fees and rental licensing fees have been around for quite some time and are effective in many of our neighboring communities.
Firstly, there's no legal definition of a community or a neighboring community. There are legal definitions for incorporated homeowners associations, unincorporated homeowners associations. There are legal definitions for municipalities. There are statutes on the books that govern homeowners associations. What's clear is Glasgow refuses to accept advice of counsel, Mary Schreider Fox. Mary Schreider Fox wrote the board multiple letters advising the board that a rental tax was a non-starter and any rental fee would require a cost justification. What South Bethany does or what Fenwick Island does is not a justification to charge a vacation rental property owner 8%. Let's go to Glasgow clip number 3.
It is also important to note that a rental fee is not a charge to the owner for renting their home, but rather a fee added to the cost of their rental.
Okay. In the case of homeowners association within municipal boundaries, take the example of Seabreeze in Dewey Beach, Delaware. It is the municipality that has the jurisdictional authority to compel the rental service to charge, in this case, a 3% tax. VRBO then collects the tax and distributes it, remits it to the municipality, Dewey Beach. Seabreeze never sees the money. In the case of a homeowners association outside of municipal boundaries, as is the case of Middlesex Beach, this scheme presupposes that all 48 vacation rental property owners are going to voluntarily add a fee, in this case a percentage fee on rental income, to their listing, and they're going to collect that money and remit it to the homeowners association. There's some problems here. Privacy. The owners of vacation rental properties are not compelled to volunteer their rates or their rental income. So this is a non-starter. It's unenforceable. It's just not going to happen. Let's go to Glasgow clip 4.
I do not believe this would negatively impact Middlesex's rental market because, as we all know, our beach's location and privacy speak for themselves.
Anyone who offers their property for rent knows the concept of fair market value. Vacation rental property owners are constantly looking online for the rates of comparable properties, moving their rate to try to maximize their revenue. If you're going to introduce an 8% rental tax, these owners are going to have to lower their base rate by 8% in order to fit that tax in. So it means they're going to see a reduction of their gross income by 8%. Regarding the fact that it's a private beach, it was a private beach before a tax was into effect. So the fact that you introduce a tax doesn't make the private beach any more valuable than it was prior. Next up, Steve Larsen gave his candidate introduction on the teleconference call. In his 4-minute speech, which he tended to repeat himself and ramble on a bit, Larsen called me out as being a purveyor of inaccurate information. Let's play Larsen clip number 1.
I think there have been communications and emails that have gone out about this rental fee issue, and unfortunately I think not all of it has been accurate.
This is what's frustrating with Larsen, is he calls me out as giving out misinformation, but he doesn't qualify what misinformation I gave out. He has put forward an argument that it's reasonable now to implement an 8% rental tax with a number of facts. Now, I have critiqued those facts and found many things to be inaccurate. So it's now incumbent on him to state what he accepts as true and what he accepts as false. And then we can argue about what we disagree with. Let's listen to Larsen clip 2.
I think it's incumbent on the board to present to the community options for addressing how we finance our community, particularly in reference to the way many other communities, both in Delaware and frankly nationally, do that. And ultimately, the community decides they want to do something or they don't through a vote.
Firstly, we as a homeowners association have operated the same way for 60 years. We get our revenue from our members. We get our revenue through property ownership. What's wrong with that? We set a budget. We divide the budget by 240 residential properties. That's the assessment. Suddenly, something's wrong with that formula. Oh, but there's these other homeowners associations that are getting revenue from tenants. What are we talking about? We're talking about 3 homeowners associations, not within municipal boundaries, that charge what are called resort fees. Well, let's go through them. Salt Meadows down in Fenwick Island charges $150 for access to a swimming pool. The pool's closed. The pool's closed this season due to COVID. They're not charging that fee. You go up to Cotton Patch. Cotton Patch charges $50 for resort fee to tenants. That money barely covers the cost of printing the laminated card. Then you have Ocean Breezes. They charge $200 resort fee for access to a swimming pool, tennis courts, and a pier. We don't have any of that. So what are we talking about resort fees? We have no amenities to charge for any of that. In any event, resort fees are charged to both owners and tenants. Let's listen to Larsen clip number 3.
Hopefully that can be done in a way that is not contentious. It doesn't have to be, but it seems that some people want to turn it into that.
Some people want to turn the concept of an 8% rental tax into a contentious issue. Some people Back up a second. 3 years ago, Marty Shecter, Nancy Glasgow, and I presume Steve Larsen authored a petition to advance an 8% rental tax, to thrust it against one set of neighbors to the benefit of another set of neighbors, with no cost justification, with no legal merit. They are sowing the seeds of division in the community. But yet, because there's resistance, because someone unraveled the scheme, someone pointed out, a number of people pointed out that the facts are just obtuse, there's no legal merit, and it's going to draw litigation. It's going to draw us like a magnet into Chancery Court because of those people. They're the problem. The problem is the people that are resisting this. They're selfish. It boggles the mind. Next up, Marty Shecter gave his candidate introduction before the teleconference call on Saturday, September 19, 2020. In his speech, Shecter starts out by reciting his participation at his daughter's wedding. Let's roll clip Shecter 1.
It was a small gathering of friends and family. All the women are beautiful, all the men were strong, and all the children were above average. Thank you, Gareth and Felix. When she was one, we bought our house on Bayberry Road. The thousands of moments of joy and happiness we have experienced with her and her friends, our family, and our friends is the perspective I bring to this community. A feeling of debt and appreciation and a desire to contribute and give back.
Now that's a very strong start to a speech. Shecter introduces or injects virtue signaling, but for the most part, Shecter is trying to persuade you that he is a thoughtful and compassionate individual who is channeling the love and affection from his friends and family onto the community, in essence, to give back. But his speech takes a dark turn as he talks about his opponent. Let's listen to clip Shecter, clip 2.
Unfortunately, not everyone feels this way. There is one who is using his social media skills to defame, malign, and insult members of the board and other members of the community who may disagree with his views. He misrepresented and misinformed the community about issues and people. His selfishness is obvious. The only thing he cares about is how much money he can take out of this community. He is a divisive force who disrespects the entire concept of community. I felt remiss as a member of the community in not making this comment.
So Shecter has moved on to his opponent and positioned his opponent as malevolent, cruel, and evil. In fact, he is the most malevolent, evil, and cruel person to ever have walked the face of the earth. If you thought President Trump was malevolent, evil, and cruel, this guy's far worse. And basically, he's telling you, look, you have no choice. You have to vote for me. If you vote for him and his allies, we're going to bring in the browncoats and the Reichstag is going to burn down. And we can't let that happen. So then Shecter proceeds to talk about his solution to the browncoats. Here's Shecter talking about his allies and bringing other volunteers on the board. Let's roll Shecter clip number 3.
I am running for the board again because I have unfinished work. I believe in sensitive leadership, sensitive to the needs of our seniors, of our children, of our visitors, sensitive to our economic needs, sensitive to those in the community who wish to give back, volunteers. There is a wealth of intelligence, experience, and desire here. There are those who wish to contribute. We must foster and utilize this board should be positive ambassadors of Middlesex, within and outside our community. There are some things we cannot change, but creating an environment where cooperation, respect, honesty, and integrity should abound should be our goal. Thank you for listening.
So basically, Shecter has come back to injecting virtue signaling, and also he injects some platitudes. But really, his message is, you can be safe with him. He's got an arsenal of allies willing to serve, willing to help out, to move his agenda along and instill and install wealth redistribution. Now, after that speech, we saw 23 unique visitors watch the MXB Wire broadcast 2020 Voter Compass Marty Shecter. 23 people watched that full video. And of those 23 individuals, 8 downloaded a fresh, revised proxy ballot. That speech undoubtedly changed a lot of people's minds. Next up, Ellen Throop addressed the teleconference call. I'll let her words do the talking. Here's clip 1.
What the conversations of the proponents of this rental tax keep forgetting is the very first and initial part, is that there's no cost justification to the rental tax within our community based upon the community setup, management, lack of involvement with any type of rentals, the owner's property rights, and how assessments are actually charged. They're charged by the lot.
Brilliant. In 2018, her speech didn't resonate with me, but this one is particularly spot on. I want to play clip number 2.
It really pains me to see the rental tax issue continuing to brew when at the outset the initial problem answers the question, but some refuse to deal with it. So then we're going to be possibly spending time and money of the board, who is volunteers, trying to address this issue that has already been addressed, already been advised by our council.
Many of you don't realize this because you don't go to the board meetings. But we owe a debt of gratitude to Ellen Throop. Ellen Throop took so much abuse, and yes, it was abuse, over the course of board meetings, standing her ground for council's advice. If it wasn't for that young lady, we would be in Chancery Court right now as a defendant in a lawsuit. We would be in litigation. The board published the winners from the election on Wednesday, September 23rd. And usually that's it. You just learn the winners. However, a week later, the board published on Wednesday, September 30th, the election results broken down by candidate. Presumably they did this to hedge off any concerns about the legitimacy of the election. It is unprecedented for the board to publish the breakdown by candidates. You just don't see that. I can't remember ever seeing a breakdown by candidates since I've owned the property at 20 Dune Road in 2002. However, right after the initial email reporting the winners, I had a number of people call, and my inbox lit up with emails. Some people who are registered users of the MXBwire.com were asking for the vote tallies broken down by candidate and whether I knew them. Of course I didn't. But also former board members contacted me, and they told me about a practice called ballot harvesting that, according to these former board members, has been going on for decades. And the people that I talked to spanned decades of their service to the board, which was very disturbing. So what I'd like to do is show you, in the case of one former board member who explained how you determine the amount of absentee ballots that are basically become angel ballots to determine who comes on the board and who leaves the board. So let's look at this graphic, if we may. Firstly, I'd like to emphasize that none of the former board members who I spoke with had any knowledge of what went on behind the scenes regarding the election of 2020. That was, of course, held on September 19th, 2020. However, the stories that these individuals recited were consistent with each other, and they served at different times from each other, again spanning different decades. So obviously there's something to it. If it was just one person coming forward with a tale, I would not be reporting it to you. It was only when 2-3 individuals came forward and told me about ballot harvesting that I started taking it seriously. So according to one former board member, let's call him Crazy Horse, the first step you need to do to estimate the impact of ballot harvesting is to estimate the total reported ballots. Next, you find variable X, the total number of genuine ballots, by adding the sum of the total votes of the candidate with the highest vote total, who you believe is out of favor with the ballot harvester or the ballot angel, and that of the candidate's logical opponent, who is in favor of the ballot harvester. Next, you subtract out the illegitimate ballots until the percentage of voter participation is a more real number. And the number that the former board member gave to me was 40% or thereabouts. So the way Crazy Horse described this to me, to determine ballot harvesting, you first need to estimate the total reported ballots. Now, these are the results that the board reported the week after the election. Those numbers translate to 627 intermixed votes. Intermixed meaning there's part of that number is genuine votes and part of it is illegitimate votes. Then you derive down the number of ballots, so that you divide by 5 because you can vote for a maximum of 5 candidates per ballot. So you get 125 ballots, but that's not correct because there's an adjustment that we have to make. There are many people that handed in a ballot with only 3 candidates or only 4 candidates. So to adjust for that, I'm going to pick a number out of the sky, 25 additional ballots. So there is a total volume of intermixed ballots, both genuine and illegit, of 150 ballots. Well, there's only 240 properties, so that suggests that 62.7% of the membership voted, and that's just ridiculous. In 2015, it took Dave Weeking 5 years to get 60% participation to update the Homeowners Association's covenants. So that can't be right. So 62.7 is way off. That's a red flag right there. So the way Crazy Horse explained it to me is there's such a thing as angel ballots. Now, angel ballots are basically absentee ballots that are signed over to a person of authority on the board that are in effect blank, so that the board member can exercise those however he sees fit. And Crazy Horse also postulated that more likely the genuine percentage of voter participation is about 40%, not 62%. So to drive that participation, genuine percentage of voter participation to 40, I have to add 50, about 50 to 60 ballots. So let's just say 55 angel ballots. So there are actually 95 genuine ballots and 55 angel ballots. So you get a genuine percentage voter participation of our target numbers, which is 39.8. You have to remember that only 29 people were on the teleconference call, not including board members and candidates. So 29, there were total 41 people on the call, yet there are 95 genuine ballots. So more than half of the people who voted did not attend the call, and that kind of makes sense. So you get 55 angel ballots. Now, I took some liberty, because I have a good idea of who is casting angel ballots. I determined that the people that are the recipients of these angel ballots would include Steve Larsen, Nancy Glasgow, Marty Shecter, Amy Whitcover Sanford, and Nora Alter. Now, if you take away these angel ballots from their totals, you see you get a different genuine vote total. Ellen would be at the top at 81 ballots. She got 81 ballots out of a total of 95. And Carol Paul performed well at 76 ballots. Then you get Bill LeConte that came in at 49, followed by Steve Larsen at 38, and followed by me at 35. And then Nancy Glasgow and Marty Shecter are down at 25 and 17, respectively. So were it not for ballot harvesting, these would be the people on the board today. But because we have, according to the allegations, we have this history of ballot harvesting, and it's believed by a number of former board members that that's continuing today, which will be covered thoroughly in the article Ballot Harvesting. You want to get these people on the board. You'll get who the grantee of those absentee ballots decides who's on the board. If the allegations are true, if ballot harvesting is real and has been going on for decades and is continuing to go on to this day, then I think it brings into question the legitimacy of this board. No one is going to incriminate themselves. So the only way we're really going to know is to have a court-ordered audit of the results. Alternatively, we could conduct exit polling and find out what people did, how they voted after the fact. HOA President Marty Shecter called the meeting on Saturday, September 26, 2020, to order at 9:32 a.m. Board members Ellen Throop, Jeff Sella, Alex Sella, Tristan Kruger, Marty Shecter, Nancy Glasgow, and Steve Larsen were in attendance. Carol Paul was not in attendance for the second straight board meeting. Larry Binkley from 21 Bayberry Road also attended the meeting. At one point, Jeff Sella disconnected Binkley when Binkley initially did not identify himself. However, Binkley rejoined the meeting after identifying himself, presumably via text message. Sean Sokolowski also joined the meeting as the board went into executive session at 10 a.m. HOA President Marty Shecter moved the board to approve an order by which there be no recording of the board meeting in any format, either in part or in whole. Ellen Throop and Nancy Glasgow both seconded the motion. There was no discussion. All board members voted in favor of the motion. I believe we have a reaction from our audio man at MXB Wire. Let's see Stephen's reaction to that motion.
I'm going to kick you out of this college. No more fun of any kind.
We apologize for that. That clearly was not our camera and sound man, Stephen Dagg. In fact, that was Mike Vernon from the John Landis film Animal House. Moving on. On a related note, we do have an update on a story we've been covering. You may remember that at this time last year, Steve Larsen caught Joe Raskauskas recording a board meeting without consent. We have learned what became of Joe Raskauskas. Apparently, the board had put in a policy in joint partnership with the FBI. Let's roll that clip of what happened with Joe Raskauskas. Raskauskas clip number 1. Our apologies again. That was not the Middlesex Beach Association Board executing a no-knock raid on the home of Joe Raskauskas in partnership with the FBI. In fact, that was the FBI executing a no-knock raid on the home of Roger Stone. Moving on. Margie Sire opened the meeting to discuss the first agenda item, which was the internal organization, ergo board positions. Tristan Kruger nominated Margie Sire as HOA president. Ellen Throop seconded that motion. All board members voted in favor to approve Margie Sire as HOA president. Alex Sella nominated Ellen Throop as HOA vice president. Jeff Sella seconded Alex's nomination of Ellen Throop as vice president. Nancy Glasgow nominated Steve Larsen as HOA Vice President. Marty Shecter seconded Glasgow's motion or nomination of Steve Larsen as Vice President. Margie Sire stated after consultations with Jeff Sella and Ellen Throop that the board needs to be, quote, looking forward to 2021 and what the succession will be in terms of the board leadership in 2021. Sire reminded the board that she will not be seeking re-election in 2021, and as such, Sire will not be seeking re-election as HOA president. Sire stated that whoever would be voted in as vice president needs to be prepared to assume the presidency in 2021. Alex Sella weighed in stating that historically, a board member within the executive committee had succeeded the president and not necessarily a board member occupying the position of vice president. The executive committee consists of the president, the vice president, the past president, the treasurer, and the secretary. Margie Sire stated that the HOA president position is in effect, quote, a full-time job, and a person who performs the duties of the presidency on a part-time basis will presumably not make an effective HOA president. Further, Sire stated that the person who succeeds her as president must have the knowledge of the organization and a knowledge of the community, which presumably both of them have. Sire further stated that anyone the board advances to the position of president needs to be, quote, prepared. Jeffrey Sella weighed in, agreeing with Sire that the HOA president position is like a full-time job, and that the candidate needs to be prepared. However, Sella disagreed with Sire in that the board member who succeeds her as president needs to be the vice president. Sella did state that any president needs to have experience on the board. Sire agreed with Sella in that the board member advancing to the presidency does not necessarily need to be the vice president. However, Sire thought the progression from vice president to president was more, quote, normal. Steve Larsen weighed in, stating that due to the fact that half of the board turns over on an annual basis, that it is impractical to plan for the succession of authority. Alex Sella, Jeff Sella, and Ellen Throop voted in favor of Throop retaining the position as vice president. Nancy Glasgow, Marty Shecter, Steve Larsen, Tristan Kruger, and Margie Sire voted in favor of Steve Larsen for the position of vice president. By a 5-3 vote, the board voted to advance Steve Larsen as vice president. Tristan Kruger nominated Alex Sella as treasurer. Ellen Throop seconded Kruger's motion. Tristan Kruger stated that Sella has a good idea of what the association's finances are. Kruger went further to state Sella is, quote, genetically inclined to handle the position given his father's profession, that being as an accountant. All board members voted to approve Alex Sella as treasurer. Jeffrey Sella nominated Ellen Throop as secretary. Kruger weighed in, saying he likes having the secretary position, but only to be a member of the executive committee. Kruger further stated that he has received help from board member Nancy Glasgow, which affords Kruger access to the executive committee had he only occupied the chair of the beautification committee. Alex Sella, Jeffrey Sella, Ellen Throop, Nancy Glasgow, Steve Larsen, Marty Shecter, and Margie Sire voted to advance Ellen Throop as secretary. Tristan Kruger voted for his re-election to the position of secretary. By a 7-1 vote, the board voted to advance Ellen Throop as secretary. Alex Sella motioned the board to enter executive session. Marty Shecter seconded Sella's motion. The board went into executive session at 10 a.m. to discuss violations, consultation with counsel, and delinquent assessments for which Ellen Throop reported 16 demand letters to delinquent accounts were sent out that Friday, September 25th, 2020. Apparently, 16 homeowners continue to be delinquent in settling their respective assessments. The ouster of Ellen Throop as vice president and in her place, Steve Larsen, cannot be understated. There's been a significant shift in the perspective of HOA President Margie Sear. She went from supporting Throop in 2019 to abandoning Throop and favoring Larsen in 2020. Now, her rationale, or explicit rationale, is that the job is quite extensive and she believes someone needs to be at the job full time, as she is. Don't believe her. In the words of Stan Lee, true believers don't believe her. As I've observed Margie Sear over the years, I've observed one thing. She makes a decision for whatever reason, and then she thinks of a plausible rationale for that decision. The true rationale for installing Steve Larsen as vice president with her intention to have him succeed her when she retires in 2021. She has not revealed that. We don't know. But we've had plenty of HOA presidents that had full-time jobs. In fact, some of our most effective HOA presidents had full-time jobs. I don't think as a homeowner association we can expect people to drop their career and become full-time HOA presidents on a volunteer basis. It's just not realistic. The other ramification of this huge event of Ellen Throop's ouster is that succession now goes to Steve Larsen. Although most of the succession went from someone in the executive committee to president, explicitly HOA President Margie Sear stated that she sees the succession going from VP to president. And maybe that will happen. But the issue now is Steve Larsen could be president as early as September 2021. And with Larsen as president, he will then have an opportunity to shape the board the way he wants. I think, given the allegations we've heard over the last few weeks, if true, then he has access to the angel ballots. He can decide what the board looks like. He can decide who is on that board. And I think in that respect, look, Tristan Kruger changed his position on the rental tax. At first, he was for a nominal yearly fee, something like $75. That felt good to him. That's his call. To being opposed to it due to the legal entanglements of advancing something without a legal basis and that violates the laws governing homeowners associations in Delaware. You know, he came around to seeing that it's not worth it. So I think Tristan Kruger's got to watch his back. He's probably not in the favor of Steve Larsen come September of 2021 when Steve Larsen takes over as president. So it will be the next year that Steve, if ballot harvesting is real and is ongoing, Steve will be able to remove him in 2022. And I think the logical step for Steve Larsen would be to reach back to the other candidates who were in favor of the rental tax proposition, namely Nora Alter and Amy Whitcover Sanford, and put them in and take Kruger out. I mean, time will tell if I'm right, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Tristan Kruger voted off that island starting in 2022. Let's see, he's up for renewal in 2021, so he would be vulnerable in 2023. HOA President Margie Sear announced that the state of Delaware has approved beach replenishment projects for both the municipalities Bethany Beach and South Bethany. An engineering firm will at some point be dredging sand from the ocean floor to the beaches. In the past, these engineering firms have requested access to the beach at Middlesex to travel across the beach. Jeff Sella stated that Sussex County and Denarec both have easements on the south end of Middlesex Beach and on the south end of the beach at Sea Colony. But the county does not have any easements between the two. Sella stated that he is in possession of the site plans for the replenishment project and would be amenable to forwarding these plans to any member of the community. In 2015 or thereabouts, the county engaged Great Lakes Dredging and Dock Corporation to perform the work. However, the county has hired a different vendor to execute the contract. Sella did not specifically name the vendor that the county awarded the contract to. Tim Switzer and Janie Switzer, who own the property at 1 Dune Road, solicited the board to waive the restriction of performing work on their property on Saturdays prior to the date whereby work on Saturdays is allowable. The Switzers have been working off a permit to demolish and rebuild the property at 1 Dune Road since the Switzers reportedly first took out a permit in December of 2019. In 2015, the board developed a permissible dates and times document, which outlines the allowable timeframes in which Middlesex Beach property owners can perform work. The document allows property owners to work on Saturdays in the off-season starting November 1st, 2020. In effect, the first Saturday that property owners can perform work on a Saturday would then be Saturday, November 7th, 2020, as November 1st, 2020 falls on a Sunday. In his introductory material, Tim Switzer voiced the point that a finished project is a, quote, good project, and that any means of reducing the duration of construction projects benefits the community. Apparently, in the spring of 2020, Tim Switzer and Janie Switzer solicited the board to waive restrictions on construction over the summer season. The board had rejected that request, citing any waiver would be a violation of the covenants. Prior to that, the board has repeatedly levied punitive fines against the Switzers for a variety of violations, including a $2,000 punitive fine reportedly over disturbing foliage on Middlesex Beach property adjacent to the property at 1 Dune Road. At one point, the board reportedly upended the Switzers' progress on the property, demanding that the Switzers produce an approval letter from Deneric prior to any further work on the property. The property at 1 Dune Road is not oceanfront, and as the Deneric floodlines do not cross the property at 1 Dune Road, the Switzers do not need any approvals from Deneric for work to proceed on their property. In any event, that one demand by the board reportedly delayed any work on the property at 1 Dune Road for 3 weeks. HOA president and former chair of the building committee, Marty Shecter, admonished the Switzers for failing to take advantage of working on Saturday when the opportunity was available in the spring earlier in the year. Janie Switzer defended her handling of the construction project by stating that when contractors are waiting on material, which does happen, there is often nothing for the contractors to do. Switzer then took Shecter and the board to task for what she framed as an unreasonable adherence to policies and rules on the part of the board. Switzer went further, admonishing the board for cultivating what she characterized as, quote, the poor reputation Middlesex Beach has amongst the greater resort community, and in particular with seasoned real estate agents, due to the infighting between the board and the community members. I should note the MXB Wire is covering this story in the upcoming investigative report entitled Passed Over, currently due for release on November 20th, 2020. In support of their proposal to waive the restrictions on working on Saturday, the Switzers presented signed materials from a number of their neighbors, stating that these neighbors take no issue with the Switzers performing work on Saturday. Steve Larsen reminded the Switzers that HOA President Marty Shecter did in fact waive restrictions on the available work hours in the spring. Larsen also reminded the Switzers that at no time did the board operate outside the covenants in effect to, quote, shut down the Switzers. HOA President stated that the prospect of granting the waiver to the Switzers would constitute a grave disservice to the members of the community who respect and adhere to the building rules as interpreted by the covenants. Ultimately, the Switzers' impassioned plea fell on deaf ears as the board voted to reject any waiver to the work restrictions in a 4-4 vote. Jeffrey Sella, Marty Shecter, Nancy Glasgow, and Tristan Kruger voted to grant the waiver, whereas Steve Larsen, Alex Sella, Ellen Throop, HOA President Margie Sear voted against any waiver. The Switzers would have needed 5 board members to vote in favor of the exemption for the Switzers to perform work on the Saturdays prior to November 7th, 2020. And now a look at the mailbag. This is my favorite part of the monthly update. And I thought we'd do something a little different this week. I thought we'd take a look at some of the postings in the Facebook group entitled Middlesex Beach Neighbors. And in particular, I want to talk about or draw attention to Facebook posting by Sally Murphy on September 25th. Sally Murphy writes, "Oh my gosh, my husband just got the latest missive from Greg P. Seriously, ... Election tampering? Election fraud? 2 unnamed board members are the source? ? There is so much vitriolic rhetoric and behavior in the world right now. Why do we need to hear, at what used to be, a friendly and peaceful oasis, ? Well, this posting was seen by 146 members of the Middlesex Beach Neighbors Facebook group, and she got 7 likes. So obviously she's not the only one who feels this way. I sense that Miss Murphy leans on the progressive side of the political spectrum. I believe she's bought in that someone sold her the prospect that to roll out an 8% rental tax to raise $250,000, someone's promised her that the assessment is going to drop by $1,000. So anyone that runs off and speaks to a lawyer and gets an opinion and shares that opinion with other members of the group, possibly dissuading them that this is not a good idea, I get the feeling that she wants to stamp that out. She doesn't want anyone hearing that opinion. Anyway, so let's continue. So Andrea Binkley responds to this thread, and she writes, "Totally agree, ! Greg P. needs to stop sending emails of his interpretation of things and stop trying to influence people to what he wants. The board needs to tell him to stop sending emails unsolicited to community members. We want our peaceful oasis back! Binkley got 5 likes. I thought I read somewhere in the history books that there was something called a First Amendment, the freedom of thought and the freedom of expression. I'm not quite understanding. If she doesn't want the emails, there is a link to unsubscribe, and she will not get any more emails. So that can't be the underlying cause of this post. This post is again supporting and aligned with cancel culture of people that want to shut down opinion. So let's go on. So Michael O'Mara weighs in, and he writes, "Totally agree." And Mike gets 2 likes for that. Then not long after that, Sally Brown, she writes in, and she writes, "Agreed!" And she gets 1 like. Then Amy Whitcover Sanford, who ran for the board on September 19th, She weighs in. She says, haven't seen it and don't want to, exclamation point. Now, this I totally get and appreciate. If you don't want to hear somebody's opinion, if it's offensive to you and it's upsetting to you, you can simply act to ignore it. You can unfollow someone in Facebook. You can unsubscribe to someone's newsletter. Problem solved. Anyway, so Whitcover gets 2 likes for this, and Susie Friedel replies to Whitcover, and she says same, and she gets 1 like. So she's weighed in. Now, scroll down, we get to Corey Ann Clark, and she writes, while people may not like his content, doesn't he have the right to share his views? ? Evidently, Miss Clark has heard about the First Amendment. She gets 1 like. I'm surprised she got any likes at all from this crowd. So immediately, the group swarms all over Corianne. Poor Corianne. She's going to get it. So immediately, Amy Whitcover replies right back, Corianne Clark. Sure, but while I signed up for the communication from the MXB board, I did not sign up for his emails. He has set up his own MXB website and blog, which is fine, but he sends out unsolicited communication that confuse my 93-year-old dad. Period. Invite all MXB to his website or to sign up for emails, but I think what he's doing is unneighborly. Fine. Again, Miss Whitcover can take care of his dad. If his dad's confused, it's understandable at 93 years old why somebody would be confused if they get an email that looks like it's from the homeowners association when it's not. She can help him out and hit the unsubscribe button. I have no idea in the directory who's 93 years old and who's vibrant and won't be confused by such material. Anyway, Whitcover gets 2 likes for this. Then immediately, following up with Whitcover is Binkley again, charging hard against Corianne. Nobody should be using the directory to send out emails to everyone. What if people started using it to advertise their business and solicit? ? Not okay. Of course, everyone has a right to their views, but they should be clearly stated as views and not appear like they are fact unless they are direct quotes. It is very misleading and not in the spirit of what Middlesex has always been about. Well, Binkley certainly understands the protocol at Middlesex Beach, but not going there. Firstly, the directory is a list of contact information. It's opt-in contact information. It's not exclusively used by the board. It's to share with people, to opt in and share with people your contact information. There's no rules as to how you can use that opt-in contact information. If you don't want to receive email from your neighbors, simply address your grievance to the board and have your contact information removed so no one can send you any unsolicited mail. So Binkley gets 1 like for this. Next, Whitcover comes back at Corianne. Oh, sorry, she's replying to Binkley. And Whitcover says, Andrea Binkley, well said. He wrote several times about me and what I thought about MXB issues without even ever contacting me. And she gets 1 like for that. Well, I actually did not. This is where we get into the concept of attribution. I wrote in my article 2020 voter compass, or 2020 election voter compass. I wrote in that article, it is reported that Amy Whitcover is running to unseat Ellen Throop. I didn't say Amy Whitcover is running to unseat Ellen Throop. I attributed it to a source on the board. It was reported that Amy Whitcover is running to unseat Ellen Throop. I don't know if that was true. I only know it is reported to be true by a number of people on the board. That's why I used the adverb reportedly. So it's confusing, I understand, but there's a subtle difference when you attribute a quote or a statement from somebody and when you say it flat out. If I said it flat out, I'd have to interview Ms. Whitcover. But because I attributed the statement to a member of the board, I don't have to talk to Amy Whitcover. So again, Whitcover gets 1 like for that, and poor Corianne's getting all beat up. So she acquiesces to groupthink, and she writes back to Amy Whitcover saying, I definitely see your point. And she gets 2 likes for that. So she got twice as many likes to come back to the group and be one of us, as opposed to being difficult and questioning whether the man has a right to his opinions. Anyway, I think it's very interesting because what you typically see when you wage an argument against something that people passionately believe in. I understand people passionately believe in a 8% rental tax. They think, hey, they're doing it down there in Fenwick Island. They're charging a 7% rental tax down there. Why can't we put that in here? It seems to be working great down there. Let's put it in here. The flaw in the reasoning is that 7% rental tax pays for services like a staffed visitor center. So Fenwick Island has decided to erect a staffed visitor center, which only benefits vacation rental properties as well as commercial businesses. So they are a municipality, Middlesex Beach is not, and they have the jurisdictional authority to tax. So they can put it in a progressive tax or a percentage fee based on rental income, because the more money you make through rental, the more benefit you're getting out of a staffed visitor center. So it makes sense. The tax isn't lowering the residents of Fenwick Island. It's not lowering the property taxes in in Fenwick Island. It's covering the cost of a service that is directed to visitors. So going back to Steve, I'm sure Steve's aware of this, but he leaves it out. He leaves it as an omission. So he wants to make an argument. We should be putting in a tax. We should be raising revenue so I can lower my assessment by $1,000. We could all lower our assessment by $1,000. But he omits the critical part of why that tax is set up in the municipality. I think, and I see there are many names here of people that live in the Pine side and not the ocean side. I think people have to appreciate that they pay right now $24.50. It's going to go up once the new contract for indemnity insurance is negotiated in 2021. When the contract ends in 2021, it'll go up by $200 to $250. And anyway, it'll dramatically go up in a couple of years. But compare what you pay to what people in Cotton Patch pay and what they get. Cotton Patch charges $17.50 as an assessment, but they don't have a beach patrol. A beach patrol costs $400 a resident. So right away, you add $400 if they had a beach patrol, you add $400 there, they're up at $21.50. We're getting in the ballpark, $21.50. We're at $24.50. Well, Cotton Patch doesn't have the drainage issues that we do on our Pintside. They have a large part of their community is oceanside. It's a higher elevation. A small part of their community is on the bay side, but they don't have the drainage issues that Middlesex Beach does. You can't get something for nothing. We are at $24.50. It's actually rock bottom. It's rock bottom for all the services that we provide to the members. I would love to see the assessment go to $4,000 and really make the place beautiful. But I understand most people, particularly on the Pine side, don't want to budge. You know, they find the assessment too expensive. And that's all for this installment of the monthly update for October 24th, 2020. As always, if you like this video, click the button subscribe. And remember to click the like button. Good day, everyone.